would like to announce to you that I will be also the moderator, not only the presenter of this panel. Please join us. This will give me extra courage. The topic of this last panel is equally important. The triple helix, the agri-food jewel, the financial instruments. So this is nothing that has to do with the theory. We're going to talk about different proposals, and of course, we're going to talk about financing instruments. Many people call these follow the money. In order to um, materialize things, you need finance. Together with me, I will have Dr. Thomas Bartzanas, Professor and Vice-Rector at the Agricultural University of Athens. Then Dr. Aristeidis Samitas, the Vice-Rector and Professor of Finance at National Kapodistrian University. Dr. Petros Varelidis follows, the Secretary General for Natural Environment and Water, Ministry of Environment and Energy. Then Mr. Athanasios Dedousis, the Director of Agri-Food Center of Excellence of the Piraeus Bank. And finally, Mr. Christos Yiannakakis, the Vice President of the National Union of Agricultural Cooperatives. This discussion will also be followed by Mr. Dr. Konstantinos Aliferis. He will be the co-moderator together with me. He is the director of the Laboratory of Pesticide Science of the Agricultural University of Athens. He is also a collaborative professor of the McGill University, a member of the EPAT. I'm very happy that we are opening this topic. We've created a lot of expectations. We're the last panel, and we really need to keep this momentum going, the interest alive. Let's start. Konstantinos, hello everyone. I would like to thank all the panelists that have stayed up until now. And I would like to say how important it is to teach, to educate, and to keep learning. In the past, we focused on the DNA and the single helix or the double helix. Now we'll be focusing on the triple helix. And according to all the data we have and all the newest developments, and the technology, the AI as well, well, the interdependence of and the cooperation between the private sector as well as the scientific institutes, the industry and the financial institutes, this is a one-way. This needs to be done in order to tackle the issue that the primary sector has to face. That's something that we heard during the earlier panels, and that's something we heard yesterday as well. And let me repeat, we talked about this in detail during those days, and we heard it during the different expositions, the agrotic exposition, etc. We see that the implementation, the adaptation of the new technologies is slow, and the investments from the private sector or the investments from the different ministries are at some points or most of the times a bit abstract, and this creates a huge issue. And then regarding the cooperatives, and we also have here the president of the agricultural cooperatives. the National Union of Agricultural Cooperatives, and we'll hear a lot about this. Now let's start with Dr. Bartzanas. We've heard many things regarding the work of the Agricultural University of Athens. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I had the pleasure, because of the co-organization, the framework of the AgriBusiness Conference and Forum. I was happy to follow both days and all the discussions, and I will use all the comments made by George Aliferis on our presence at the different expositions, Agrotica and elsewhere, in order to comment on the state of the agricultural sector in Greece. It is a very important sector, and this, of course, creates a lot of jobs for different people in rural areas, in the mountains, or near the sea. Yesterday, we heard that although this is, of course, very powerful sector, it is also a sector under stress, under pressure. And we've heard it since yesterday as well. We've heard about the geopolitical changes, how these are influencing our sector. There is, of course, instability within the markets, and we have the demands from the consumers that really are asking for safe and cheap products, but also qualitative products. It is apparent that the old model of the production sector that was based, of course, on the use of different products that were harming the environment. It is apparent that we need to change this perspective and use different products, change our direction and our approach. And a lot of people have said this in the past, that we need to change our production model. We should not focus on the model, we should focus on the maximizing the value of this chain. We are an academic and scientific institution, and we believe that the crucial factor in order to move to this new model is innovation. The implementation of innovation in order to join these innovative new systems. But how to do that? The backbone is, of course, the digitization. It is one of the most important elements that can lead us to the implementation of innovation. We're talking about robots, AI, different automation systems, different sensors, different satellite images and data, and all this lead us to the terms of smart agriculture, smart farming, etc. Everything, of course, will make the production more productive, will make it quicker and cheaper and more precise. We've talked about traceability systems, the farming industry. We have three pillars: the production of innovation, the creation of innovation, and the adoption of innovations. We have different scientific institutions, research institutions that do actually produce a lot of innovations, a lot of services, a lot of digital services. How many of them are being adopted in these processes, the real life processes? Less, a lot less. How many of them come to reach the farmers so the farmers can use them? Even lesser. And now my final point focuses on collaboration, cooperation. We need to move to more sustainable systems. We in our university have already created such a system that brings those actors together. Our CEO yesterday made yesterday a presentation and participated at a panel. And we are creating right now a new cooperative scheme. And in order to participate to one of the most, let's say, ambitious programs, a spin-off program, such a this is something that is possible. It wasn't possible when I was studying. We're bringing together financial institutions. We're bringing together public bodies. We're bringing together the private sector and others. Thank you very much. Well, what I've been thinking during the last 2 days, the works of this forum, is that we are discussing about robots, AI, and other things, but how ready are we actually to implement and add those models? When we are talking about robots, we should not think of human-like robots. Whether that has to do with, let's say, the land itself or elsewhere. I'm sure that in the future we will be able to see those human-like robots to work in the agricultural sector, because we are already seeing that we lack of actual human workers. We conducted a conversation yesterday with Mr. Yiannakakis, and we commented on the lack of people. But what we want to focus right now is that we will gain more information from all of these tools in order to improve and optimize the production. We need a new generation of human capital to use the data, to understand the data, and create. You are right to comment that the introduction and the use of any digital tool in the agricultural sector right now is very low. We should be aware of a certain fear that is apparent for the use of such services, and that's where the research and educational institutions come into place in order to change that, hand in hand, of course, with all the private and public parties and bodies. Thank you.
Now, let's continue with the Vice-Rector, right? Of course. Vice-Rector, I know firsthand all the work you do at the university. Now, when it comes to startup companies, how do you envisage the future, and how could the university further support new spin-offs and innovation that will be generated through the Greek university? And of course that could then be capitalized on by the private sector maybe. Well, thank you very much for this question. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Yiannakakis. It's great finding ourselves here talking about an important topic. I am deeply concerned by the issue of innovation and technology in a country like Greece. I'm saying that because Greece has been lagging quite behind in terms of development and investment in technological and innovative companies. through the University of Athens and Archimedes, which is the office for the transfer of know-how of the University of Athens. What do? Well, we transform the very important findings in startup businesses. And we try to support those businesses through mentoring and bring them up to a certain point where they can get investments until they get to the point where they become a VC and they're able to draw their own funds. So we are standing by them. On April 28th, we have the so-called Investors' Day. We invite all VCs in the country. We have mapped the country, and they all collaborate with the University of Athens. And we invite them on a special dedicated day where the 10 spin-offs of the company will make a presentation and will ask for funding. And all that with a view to further financing their actions. But what is the problem here? Well, the problem is that the university provides support, the university invests heavily because we have to register patents, you have to be quite patient in order to have an ROI, which does not happen immediately. It might take years. And along that course, we have the possibility of providing additional training, education, and finding solutions while waiting. Well, you see, throughout that period, there are many risks lurking. And there's too much uncertainty because we have geopolitical turmoil, changes, developments. I was impressed by the title of that conference because it also addressed geopolitical changes. I believe that this is the main problem we are being faced with. At some point we make predictions, we say what we might anticipate or not, but then the risks that emerge are things that cannot be easily managed or dealt with. So we try to create risk mitigation methods and systems in order to talk about risk sharing. In that way, we are involved in that design and planning part. All that with a view of achieving the optimal results. For new businesses that set their foot for the first time in the market, what is important is not for them to vanish, is for them to survive throughout the years. And secondly, we want to create a product that can be differentiated, that will be innovative. So at the same time, we will have to create tools and instruments that can guarantee and ensure the existence of those innovative approaches in the future. This is not an easy task. This is underpinned by extensive research in our laboratories, Archimedes and elsewhere. And so we also use blockchain technologies. We apply procedures which, in the case of financial instruments, are implemented in fintech scenarios. We have direct links, research and other links, and we develop predictions models that can bring us as close as possible to risk management. I tend to say that risk is the difference between what you expect and what actually happens. But if you do not expect that the conflict in the Gulf will continue for a certain period of time, days or months, and if your predictions are not good, then apparently you will be failed by the results. So in order to be close to those predictions and to make good predictions, what do you need? You need robust data and have the right algorithms. It is in this context that we have developed this training process, both in machine and deep learning, and we try to support all our spin-offs. Professor, a question. Since we talk about climate change, that's a popular topic. We know that agriculture is heavily impacted by climate change. Do you believe that when we talk about the imminent future, all those models that currently exist in paper and at some point will turn into practice, could they help crops in order for us to deal with all those changes due to climate crisis? Well, I am confident that yes, they can be helpful, but you see, the good predictability rate offered by some of those tools is quite good, allowing us to be very close to what we anticipate or expect. And in that way, we can further mitigate risk. It's all about the data that we have, the quality of the data, and the way in which we use them. But when we talk about the primary sector, if you don't have good models for the management of all those aspects, it would be quite difficult to do things that will lead to increased productivity. And now I would like to address Secretary General from the Ministry of Environment and Energy. What I would like to know, as you represent the state, is which are the priorities of the state in that field. You have two important pillars to address: energy and water resources. We have talked about energy, but water resources are of paramount importance not only for agriculture, but for our very existence. So, which are your priorities? Allow me to say that environment and the agri-food sector are inextricably linked. 2 days ago, we adopted the conclusions during the Ministerial Cabinet, the Council of Ministers of the European Union, and I had the privilege to represent our country. So the conclusions have to do with bioeconomy. And all the conclusions of the Council that also determine the policies that will follow at a later stage. And everything had to do with our interconnection between the environment and the agri-food sector. All that builds, the agri-food sector rather, builds on the agricultural sector. Those things are inextricably linked. Water, on the other hand, is quite obvious association. If you don't have water, you don't have the option of growing any plants. You know that, because when we talk about irrigated farms and holdings, you do realize that the more water you have, the better productivity you will get. However, at the same time, we must not forget that water is being polluted due to intensive farming and intensive breeding. In general, there is a pollution of water resources due to agriculture eutrophism, close to farming holdings, where we have too many greenhouses. We have extensive soil pollution with plastics, because it's quite difficult to replace plastic greenhouses, so it's often for that ground layer to stay in the soil. So you do realize that all this combined with waste from agricultural production process, food waste, in the aspect of climate change, lead to numerous repercussions. We know that there are cases of some years that are characterized by droughts, other days with prolonged heat waves in summertime, and this might have an impact on the viability of some crops. So this is why we might need to consider a rotation of crops, but we know that climate change related policies, because we have a goal for ultimate decarbonization up until 2050, but in order to achieve that, well, actually that's the second law of thermodynamics. We cannot have zero emissions, so we can also have the drawdowns. But what does drawdown mean? It means to plant more crops. So in that way, we need to ensure that we make this whole concept attractive to private investments. And in that way, it will be easier having an environmentally sustainable and financially sustainable approach. In fact, all aspects related to environment are relevant to agriculture and soil, of course, because if we don't have high quality of soil, either in terms of chemical pollution or content, nutrients, you do realize that we won't be able to have a good quality of products. At the same time, when it comes to agriculture, you know that we have some foundational, some basic problems in terms of the land. Let's say that in Greece we have an average of 54 stremas per holding, whereas the European average is not that. The European average is 3 times that number. And we have a high age average, which means what? That we don't have enough new young farmers. We have too many old farmers. And this means that it's less likely for more innovative solutions to be adopted by the older generations, either for psychological or practical reasons, because we realize that if I think that in 5 or 10 years' time I will get retired, why bother change the way in which I'm making ends meet? And I can more or less make ends meet. And also there is an ongoing discussion at the European level. So the CAP absorbs a big percentage of the European budget. We talk about the vast percentage of that. And the CAP needs to become more financially and environmentally sustainable. So when we talk about 40% of the CAP, which is 40% of the agricultural budget of the European Union, this will be given for environmental, let's say, actions. And that's the framework in which we have to operate. Well, in the humble perspective of the Secretary General of Natural Environment and Water Resources, we collaborate with the Ministry of Rural Development because they have the main say in terms of irrigation, and our goal is to promote solutions that will help us save on water resources, ensure better irrigation, reduce any waste of water across the network and the grid, reuse of waste. You see, we have this problem in Greece even when we have processed water from biological cleaning that can be given to the farmers don't take it. And why? Well, because they have free of charge water from Aliakmon River. So you see that the whole pricing and billing policy is linked to that. This is also linked to the energy aspect, because irrigation entails some costs from pumping, because we have underground drilling, so this is how we pump water. Water does not come from reservoirs, so we have a high pumping cost. And then we have accelerated degradation of the aquifer. Usually some farmers do not pay their bills, which is a solution, but then we have just debt accumulating and growing. And then, at the end of the day, that debt has to be paid by the society as a whole. So the whole issue of the cost, which is highly energy dependent, is a very important issue. That is not a point of concern for farmers only. You understand how I'm saying that. I empathize with them. I share their concerns regarding the energy cost. They will talk about oil or power for drilling or the pump stations that they have. But this is also relevant to the entire society, because at the end of the day that cost has to be borne by the entire society. So we also carry out actions also through the RRF in order to be able to reduce that cost through more advanced pump systems. Thank you, Secretary General, for that statement. Let me get back to the topic of that panel. We talk about the triple helix. How do you consider, how do you see that synergy between the ministry, research institutes, private sector, all that with a view to providing solutions, because we're here talking about solutions and moving forward. Which are the policies that you would bring forward regarding the soil or anything else in order to move forward? Well, the directive for soil entails too many challenges for us. Well, for the time being, I believe that only 24 countries have a soil policy. We don't have one yet. So we need to figure out who does what, which service, which agency is the competent agency for that. You do realize that this is a major challenge because at the end of the day, this is a topic that touches upon different factors. So we have the institutes of the Ministry of Rural Development. They try to study the quality of the soil. They have amazing researchers and scientists who are specialized in that. It also has to do with underground water. Therefore, we also have ERME. And we also have the Institutes of Rural Development. This is also relevant to forests. This is also relevant to farmland. This has to do with the industrially polluted land. And there are some processes in place in order to remove that pollution. So you do realize that we have too many aspects and too many state bodies that need to collaborate, and this is tricky. We at the Secretariat General, and we were talking about that during the break, we have the political, let's say, responsibility to plan the soil policy, but when it comes to the execution level, well, we don't have a substantial part there, because this is under the purview of someone else, and it's a major challenge considering how you can have substantially understaffed services undertaking additional workload. There's, let's say, a natural disdain of the colleagues from public administration that prevents them from undertaking additional work because they believe that they have an excessive workload. And the truth is that those who work and want to work, yes, they have an excessive workload. All the others, well, it is hard to rely on them, and we cannot change the world. If only we could do that. We, at the Ministry of Environment, well, we can contribute to the following productive sector, and I believe that we have also a relevant tender for that. We want to build the rules in order for forest holdings, for tree crops, to be able to have carbon credits in order to receive state funding for tree crops. And we as Secretariat General focus on that. And we believe that this is going to bring substantial midterm value for Greek farmers. Well, midterm is a problematic formulation here in terms of politics, but anyway, well, I believe that one man can change the world. And I believe that. Someone might feel that's utopic. So you believe in fairy tales? Yes. Yes, I do. Well, yes, the president does so. You know which president. Let's move on now to Mr. Dedousis, the man who has the money. I'm saying that money has the power to move everything. So, Mr. Dedousis, you are here representing Piraeus Bank. We know that you have a very interesting department at your bank. It might be the only bank in Greece that has a department which is dedicated to aids and loans and everything that can help a farmer grow and develop and implement all those amazing things. So you have the floor.
Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be with you because in a few minutes we've heard so many structural topics that the agri-food sector has to focus, has to tackle, but within these topics lies chance as well. In order to invest in the agri-food sector on the topic of technology, you need to differentiate. What we see right now is that it is impossible not to do so. And let me comment on what Secretary General said about water. Many times we see natural resources as an environmental issue. That is the one dimension, but we need to make clear that water it is a very important and basic um, um, uh, thing of the production. So if we want to invest in different systems like automation systems and other systems, then the risk increases. So, Ms. Security, the financing is just one part of the subject. What we need to see is how are we going to invest and finance the right projects. And let me just show you just one thing. This is not something, let's say, that only concerns the future, but I asked ChatGPT to showcase how the future of agriculture will be. When I saw this image, then I thought, well, that's not possible, that's too far away. But I started analyzing the image. Then I thought that what we see is actually um, is looking like a greenhouse. Well, we see that there is a technology to control the environment of the greenhouse that still exists today. All of these systems that are being here depicted in this picture are available in the market. Well, you might say that we travel all over Greece, but we haven't seen such thing in Greece. Well, let me tell you that such um, plants, such greenhouses exist, and we at Piraeus Bank think that no one can go there and reach this level alone. So how are you going to finance your plan, your investment plan, your future plan to move forward? We wish to invest into technology in order to reduce our costs, increase our productivity, and also to prepare ourselves for climate reasons. This, of course, concerns the resilience. Well, this image is quite impressive. It really looks like something from a Hollywood movie. But how much does all of this cost? That's the most important issue. Well, each investment needs to cover a different need, and there is a different price for each need. What we need to do is to find the proper technology for the proper potential investor. In all economies, there are smaller, or larger investments. So there's no price to mention here, but what we need to think about that this technology that's been depicted here is being supported, it is available. And we've heard from the Vice-Rector, Mr. Bartzanas, earlier that in our country, the biggest sectoral program to develop the controlled production in greenhouses has been released, and we had more than 900 applications, 900 businesses have applied, which means more than 500 million euros in investments. It is something very important. The will here is not just to produce food, but to produce something that can be controlled, produce sustainability, produce technology. Do you think that this scheme can attract a private farmer, or does the scheme need to reach cooperatives? Can just a simple farmer use this? Well, the first program I mentioned can be used from small farmers. Let's say the middle plot of land in the area of Messenia is different to the one a farmer has in the area of Macedonia. That's a decision each farmer needs to take. Will they do it on their own? Will they cooperate with other farmers or other people? Let's now move on to Mr. Yiannakakis. Good afternoon. For quite some time, I've been seeing a very structural change Greek agriculture needs to undergo. And based on what we've heard is that the Greek farmer needs to become actually an entrepreneur, because if he remains just a farmer, that won't be viable. We've heard different things and we've cooperated with different corporations. And I believe that there is an issue in order for you to find investments. What do you have to comment on this? Let's see how things are. After things collapsed when we had the financial crisis as well, we tried to rebuild things. As we know, in Greece things are limited when it comes to the number of plots of land one owns. So today, how things are that in the registry of the Ministry of Development, we have 1,200 cooperatives registered. This is a small number, and we have 350 groups of farmers. This is something different compared to the cooperatives. A group of farmers needs to have 5 people joining forces. Compared to the cooperatives, there we need 10 people cooperating, 10 or more. How many people have joined the cooperatives? Based on the data we have until 2023, we have 150,000 farmers, natural persons who are members of these cooperatives. In total, we have 6,400 farmers who have made requests and applications to join the different schemes. These belong to 23% of the farmers. That's how things are right now. Another thing to mention is that more than 60% of the members of the cooperatives are older than 60 years old. So that means that the future is not that green and not that good for the agriculture. And after having heard the latest statements from the Ministry of Agriculture, we had 40,000 euros for younger farmers to join and to create their own agricultural businesses. Let's talk about financing. Nowadays, from the 640,000 farmers, all of those who have contracts with the contractual farming, are very few. Only 300 have such contracts with the investment banks. 95% of the contractual farming takes place in the Piraeus bank. If the fact that no more farmers are being subsidized, this has to do with applications that are not being made or other limitations. How will this be solved from the farmers? Well, they actually buy, let's say, pesticides and other things they need, and they pay them back later at the businesses. And something that is very timely for the different fruit trees is a lack of workers. For example, the peaches, we have the cost that has risen for more than 50%. If we don't solve the lack of workers, then we'll be having a huge issue. We are offering almost 80 euros per day per worker, and we still cannot find people to cover these empty um, job posts. Let's talk about our industry. We need to modernize our industry, we need to modernize our ways, and then we should move on with innovation. I'm quite old, as you can see, and when I was young, we kept doing things by hand. If we kept using the same method, we wouldn't continue with the production, let's say, of cotton. Um, so we have made some advancements, but we need to do more. Let's talk about the olive trees. All countries plant olive trees, Spain, Italy, etc. And they use modern means to um, gather the olives, to harvest the olives, but we still do it by hand. We're in 2026. No matter how good the quality is, we need to take into consideration the costs. We have higher costs compared to the other European countries. Other data that we have concern the different insects. We have created 19 different stations in order to measure all the different insects. We have different satellite data. So we use all of this data to move forward with innovation. When we wanted to restructure the RRF program with the aid of 166 million euros, only 69 projects were submitted and around 30 were accepted. That means that only 20 to 25 will move to the next stage. That means that the different governments are actually losing money by it, and we are not moving forward. Up until 2025, the losses, the damages that the ELGA kept paying was around 11 million euros per year. Since 2015, because of climate change, these damages have multiplied. We are now responsible to cover more than 250 million euros on losses. If we cover everything, then we would reach 500 million euros. What needs to be done? We need to create a new program of energy protection, let's say create new mechanisms, new systems against weather phenomena that of course kill our crops, and things not look well there. What happens with climate change and all these losses? The available income reduces. Our funds are getting depleted, and we have fewer products for the markets. This data needs to be examined from all of us together. And finally, let's look at the market, where many people there. We compete each other. We are lowering our prices, and we're doing that for the supermarkets and against the farmers. What happens with different fruits? The kiwis. More than 50 bodies you trade with kiwis. In New Zealand, the farmers actually earn €2 per kilo, when this has been sold 5.5 euros per kilo. We only get €1 per kilo. Although we have more than 60,000 planted kiwi trees. Our ability to store these kiwis in the fridges do not exceed the 300,000 tons. We will, in the next few years, we will produce more kiwis, more than 100, 200,000 more kiwis that we can store. That means that the prices are going to drop further. We saw all the different happenings from the farmers that went out on the streets and demonstrated. Everything you said is very interesting. And I saw some of the panelists nodding. That means they agree with you. So what I noted down is that we have cooperatives that actually are losing people. You talked about the modernization of the farming industry and how can we move forward. The last thing you talked about producers and farmers aging. Secretary General, how can we act actually? Because Mr. Yiannakakis says that things are looking rather slim. And we are in 2026, so during the last 40 years he has been seeing the same things happening. What can happen actually in the next 10 years so that we move on, we move forward?
Let's also talk about the shortage in workforce. Well, the reason why the system does not change And the way in which we work does not change is because amidst all those problems, in a magical way, that system is sustained and preserved. And why is that? Because we have the budget from the CAP that allows for the maintenance of all those distorted practices. Because we do realize that necessity is what drives change. If there is no necessity, then no change happens. So there is a foundational, structural element. I do realize that it's difficult for the CAP to change, and we know that the CAP, among other measures, also talks about the instant aids and grants to the farmer. And farmers are citizens who vote. So it is very difficult for any government, I'm not talking about a specific political party, at the European level it's difficult for any government to come to an agreement about transitioning to something new. We know that every transition entails some hurdles, but who is going to bother doing that when they have a stable way in which they can ensure that the whole agricultural production has been okay? If not managed, then the money, which is a paramount element for sustainability of the agricultural production, is there. So I believe this is a problem that has to do with the CAP and the fact that we don't have many young, new, dynamic, strong, active farmers that will pave the way, because they are looking ahead with a horizon of 30 to 40 years. Because it's all about how we can see the CAP, but this goes beyond my purview and mandate. Thank you, Secretary General. Now, Mr. Bartzanas. Well, allow me, no offense, because I'm also an advocate of greenhouses. In all the committees I have participated, I keep saying that we can no longer continue with data saying that 80 to 90% of Greek greenhouses are wooden and non-permanent structures. So we need to ensure some degree of transformation in order to move forward. How do you see this whole issue of greenhouses based on last year's initiative undertaken by the Ministry for Greenhouses? And secondly, the second part of my question is whether farmers and students are trained or can be trained on new technologies, greenhouses, hydroponic crops, AI, etc. Well, before sharing my perspective, I would like to build on what Mr. Varelidis said, the Secretary General, because he talked about a differentiated CAP and a change in the CAP. As we know, the CAP changes. Mr. Varelidis said that as per the existing CAP, we have two pillars. We have direct and indirect aids, and we also have a standard budget for each country to manage the CAP. This means that there is no budget guaranteed, and every year that budget is included in a broader cohesion fund in each and every country, and then it is up to the countries to decide how to distribute and allocate those funds across all activities, including agriculture. In December, we had the major rallies demonstrations held by the farmers, and they were talking about the ways in which aids were granted through the CAP. And in Brussels, there was another rally of European farmers, not for the distortion of aids, because in the future there will be no aids. Hopefully that we had a positive result there. Now we have a fund that has been created in order to fund such cases. That's a parenthesis I wanted to what I wanted to mention about that. Now, let's move on now to what Mr. Aliferis asked me. When I went to the university, my professor, Konstantinos Gitas, who was also an advocate of greenhouses, kept saying ever since that an agricultural model that's quite relevant to Greece and could also give solutions to the structural problems of agricultural production is, of course, greenhouses. And he was trying to persuade everyone to incentivize the development of greenhouses in Greece. Over the past 20 years, the greenhouse surfaces in Greece has been more or less the same. The only comforting thing has been that we had big units where we saw some intensity of technology. Mr. Dedousis talked about that. So 1 year ago, we had this flagship project, which was a collaboration not only with the Ministry of Development, but we also need to give credit where we should give credit, because they are also proposing, drafting and implementing such flagship programs. I'm talking about the bank that is currently represented in this panel. I'm talking about Piraeus Banco, which has created the relevant ecosystem. Well, if you want my personal opinion, it's one of the few times where we see aids granted for a specific sector, rather than having a vertical and horizontal measure. So we have a sectoral aid, and the demand was multiple times the supply. So I'm confident that as of the next 3 years, because right now the applications that have been submitted for that program are being assessed, and we will have more new greenhouses in Greece, and we will be able to talk about an entirely different model. Now, what is at stake here? Based on what Mr. Dedousis showed us, because he showed us a beautifully equipped greenhouse, one part of that has to do with proper design and planning, but in order for that production unit, for that production system to be sustainable, we need to ensure proper management and optimization of all production methods, especially when we talk about greenhouses, where we have multi-purpose production units for the production of food. And the ultimate result relies on numerous factors. To that point, the triple helix steps in, because we have resources. So from the academia, the research community, the bodies that provide financing, the users, that's very important in order for us to achieve the optimal result. This is not a random fact that in that room, right now, in the last panel of the day, we have this flagship greenhouse development program, and we have representatives of all those bodies. We have representatives from research and academia. I am here and I'm responsible for the relevant laboratory, the Agricultural University of Athens. We also have producers, farmers who have their own greenhouse, and of course we have representatives from the financial system. This is where the future lies. Synergies. Mr. Yiannakakis said that in terms of mechanization, innovation, and I agree, because innovation does not mean mechanization or further mechanization of the production. However, the adoption of innovation in any form it is provided, let's say that we use machines in order to collect cotton, but having a greenhouse and opting for hydroponic crops, that's a sort of innovation that requires a change of culture that will lead to more optimized, more sustainable production system. Of course, the users, like the previous panelists have already mentioned, are important, because we have an aging farmers population, and their educational level prevents them from introducing technology and innovation in their system. So it is to us to create the differentiators, the curricula that can help us move towards this direction. When it comes to the greenhouses, we are in the process of preparing something, a master's degree, which is specialized in that, in collaboration with Piraeus Bank, that will prepare and train executives for this particular sector. And the question is, how can you comprehensively and holistically support a sector? Well, apart from providing funding, we create the right mechanism, we lay foundations in order for that to be sustainable. And allow me to mention a last point about the example of a university, because sometimes the top-to-bottom approach might be effective. We have the Bocconi University, which is a private university considered to be a leader in their field in Europe. Federico Bocconi was a person who owned shops of clothing, etc. And he wanted to have executives that would be able to lead the way and change the paradigm of their business. So he created his own school in order to train the executives that would work in his businesses, and this school grew to become the Bocconi University. Thank you very much. Well, I intended to ask a question to Mr. Samitas, but instead I would like to ask Mr. Yiannakakis to make a comment on that. Do you believe that Greek farmers are ready? Well, first of all, I would like to say that in order for you to implement innovative systems, you need to have an innovative system to guide you. And this innovative system will help you buy equipment and train. And then we need to use that in order to reduce the cost and produce high quality products as per the market requirements. We cannot have innovation unless this goes through organized collectivities. Then the state needs to finance such a system, such a cluster, in order for us to yield the productivity we anticipate or we want. Let me give you an example. Through the existing program, we have spent 80 million in order to pay the so-called agricultural advice. And that was an exceptional trick, because it is a trick in order for agronomists to get 1,400 euro more by providing this advice. And then sometimes that amount would be divided between the farmer and the agronomist. Well, that's the so-called Greek phenomenon. So in that case, money is there, but they were managed quite poorly. If that 80 million or any amount had to go through the collectivities, because we need to have external guidance, and then we would hire the relevant scientific staff in order to co-guide based on what the market wants. In that case, you do realize that the ROI on that 80 million would have been multiple. And therefore, we need to consider how the money that we give should be given in a way that will make them effective, yield results, because in business it's all about the results. When you draw a line and there's not a positive result, then you have to be held accountable and you leave the sector. So we need to ensure a positive impact from everything we do. Innovation needs to be adjusted through the existing systems, always with a clear guidance and orientation towards cost reduction. Thank you. Allow me also to say something. I know I'm a team player, so I wanted to ask a question to Mr. Dedousis, further to what Mr. Yiannakakis said. It is true that the ministry has its own programs. We are waiting for the fund for agricultural entrepreneurship. I don't know whether you have designed the funding tools, the consulting projects, in order to have a comprehensive proposal that is official at the level of cooperative or private initiatives, and this could ideally lead us to the final product.
Well, first and foremost, let's comment that during the last few months there is a lot of mobility when it concerns the large-scale investment at the agri-food sector. The reasons have been discussed in this panel during the previous panels as well. What we actually do at Piraeus Bank, what is our strategy, what's the kern of our activities? Piraeus Bank is the only bank that has an agricultural direction. There is a specialized section there that consists of different agronomists and different financial analysts that are responsible to understand where is the need and how can the investment meet the technology and innovation. If I am to be given a tool that I am not trained to use and I'm not aware of how to use it, then I will personally fail. So, in an environment where the funding and the financing is there, but also the people responsible for the advising are there, is the best thing to do. Uh, Let's see what happened at the greenhouses. Be we created, and Piraeus Bank is participating at a green hub. The director of the company is with us today. Aside from the financing, two major universities of the country are participating: the University of Agriculture of Athens and the University of Macedonia. So, Mr. Sanders said this earlier, that we want to bridge what comes out of the university. We shouldn't just keep it on itself. Can we implement it in a new innovative technology and implement it in a new innovative and productive sector? So we have two major universities with their spin-offs. We have two of the largest companies present, two companies that work on greenhouses, on hydroponics and automations. That's how we come closer. That's how we attract new projects, not just with financing. And something else that we really believe in is the good collaboration. We cannot foresee everything. And just a comment on foods and the production of foods. How are we going to guarantee sustainability? We need infrastructure. We need well-being, not only for people but for animals as well. We need new plants. These are not just challenges. I believe these are opportunities, and we can use them in favor of us. Then let's move on, if you allow me to pose a question to Mr. Samitas. Now, let's talk about geopolitics. We, as agronomists, we've seen that the society and politics, uh, people are not really interested on the primary sector. We see that this sector is a rather crucial one, and we've heard it and we've talked about it. We know that food security is crucial. So how can we actually raise the importance of the agri-food sector in the society? What actions can be undertaken? Thank you for your question. I believe that the primary sector is number one. I agree with you. Mr. Dedousis said something about securing and safeguarding the quality, the food quality within the next few years. and of course the existence of the food and of course water supply is crucial, and there are of course challenges ahead. In 2015 I visited Mr. Dedousis Singapore. That's when I saw the image you just presented to us, and that was in real time. In Singapore had to face, after leaving Malaysia, the limited space for cultivation. At the same time, they needed to cover the food needs of the diet needs of their population. So they they started cultivating horizontally, vertically, and that's when I saw different things. So where there is a need, there is a way. In Greece, we always had all of these things. We had the area, we had the means of financing, we had the will. But what happened is there was always someone coming to point out the mistakes. And now let's talk about the financial literacy. In the past, I was at a different institution and I was trying to convince farmers back then to come closer to these topics. What, why is financial literacy important? Well, only 10% of people are actually financial literate. So, for me to start a conversation of creating innovative products or implementing innovative solutions with people that are not actually able to comprehend this, it's not the right way to go to move forward. So we, along with the universities, need to educate the general public that things are changing. Right now, we are going through a total technological transformation. The the only essence financial um, um, notion that is present is the notion of the digital technological era. And this is all combined with geopolitical changes, conflicts, and let us ask ourselves, how ready are people to understand this, to undertake larger uh, financial products, to use other tools and understand other notions. These are very hard things to do, and these are very difficult. And you're right to say so, Mr. Secretary General, that the CAP is changing, and we are very lucky to have the uh, funding, financing. So one thing I have to comment is that we never calculated the return on these investments. How is this investment, how much is it multiplied? There are many questions to be answered. We need to take care of the foundations and actually water the tree of uh, financial means. In Greece, we are still discussing about modern machines, modern tools. We haven't reached the innovative levels other countries have. So I fear that no matter the different cooperative schemes, no matter the financing, no matter the aids, if we don't actually calculate and measure the results, then we won't be able to move forward. In the future, there will be tools that will give people the financial means for investments, but people need to understand those tools, understand those investments. In the Netherlands, there are such tools available. What is there visible? What can one see in this tool? Well, the first thing one can see is the impact of the investment. So, I believe we need to improve all of these systems when it comes to the knowledge people have, and then events into financial tools, which within such a crucial geopolitical era will help us move forward. We just have 5 minutes. I would like to ask for each of the panelists to make a final remark, final comment.
Secretary General, you have the floor first. I believe that the environment and the agri-food sector go hand in hand. Funding from the European Union will be associated with the environmental aspect of the crop or the breeding activity. Therefore, I believe that at the level of funding and financing, this will be key in order to give, or rather receive, the financial instruments from the European Union. Or that with a view of achieving an agriculture and breeding sector that will be sustainable and able to compete the similar sectors in Europe, because you do realize, given that we have small plots, small holdings, we need to focus on preserving the quality of our agricultural breeding product, not the quantity, because if we try to compete on the level of quantity, we will lose because we have small holdings and fewer resources. So we need to focus on the quality, which can be ensured through the environmental aspect of agriculture and breeding. Mr. Bartzanas. Well, when we talk about sustainable food production systems that will also integrate a certain level of knowledge and technology, carefully focused financial instruments, either we talk about CAP-derived funds or ministry-derived funds, they need to be specific and dedicated. I keep talking about the example of greenhouse in Greece, which is an exceptional example. It is an indicative example, and maybe in the future we could focus on other production elements, for example, fisheries, trees, or anything else. And we also have to focus on the impact of the triple helix, synergies across research bodies, production companies, technology companies, financial institutions, and the end users. In that way, every endeavor will go beyond the support stage, will ensure a competitive, sustainable, and profitable outcome. Mr. Samitas. Based on what we have already mentioned, I would like to say the following. Funding is not enough. We need to opt for a transformational perspective. We need to see what goes on in the field of digital tools, smart irrigation, logistics, branding, openness, and all those things need to start with financial literacy. And this is how research in universities are linked to our need to have those needs met. Agriculture should no longer imply the primary sector. Agriculture should be seen as a comprehensive agri-food value chain sector. I believe we should focus on the full set. In countries such as Greece, where agriculture has a big development aspect, this goes beyond food production. We shouldn't look at it only under that perspective. It has to do with gastronomy, with tourism, with business activity. So what we're interested in is having a national financial policy. This is what we care about, because that policy will consider agriculture in a strategic way, as agriculture was the key pillar for the growth and development of this country. And this will lead to a full mesh of investment opportunities and the relevant instruments. This is the perspective we should adopt rather than trying to see what we should finance unilaterally in order to support, let's say, Messina, Thessaly, or anything else. All those things are not moving towards the right direction. So we need to look at the entire value chain. Mr. Dedousis, what is clear to me, and actually Mr. Samitas has already mentioned what I wanted to say. We no longer talk about primary, secondary sectors or manufacturing or processing sectors. We talk about food production, and we need to approach that sector in the proper way. It's all about health, safety, independence, and self-sufficiency. Based on what has been mentioned since this morning and in the context of this panel, we cannot stand still. We need to move forward. There are numerous challenges lying ahead. We talked about financial illiteracy, technological illiteracy. It's true, but the question here is how we will move forward. And I gave you an example earlier about the following. We believe in synergies and collaborations, and we believe that finance should not happen on its own. This is why we at Piraeus Banco, we support the entire spectrum of that investment. We want financing funds rather to finance innovations. And you, President? Well, we know there's a shortage of strategy at the level of the state, the ministry, associations and farmers. My perspective, and I believe it's a perspective shared by numerous people, is that we have to create an agricultural chamber. And that chamber should be independent. There is a way to do that. The Prime Minister also announced that. And the political leadership of the Ministry of Development also agrees with that. Through such a structure, we will be able to ensure that adequate training and education is provided, and we will be able to create more jobs in the agricultural sector, because we want to have more administrative-like and more practical-like positions, and at the same time we will also have a monitoring mechanism that will rely on the top-to-bottom approach, because when we say that we have 640,000 farmers, then you do realize that we are still being faced with an unstructured, non-organized sector. Second point. Someone talked about the Dutch. Yes, it's true. They have the so-called operational programs. In Greece, due to the limited number of farmers' associations, I believe we can draw up to 15 million per year. in order to finance numerous actions. For example, my cooperative, which is the biggest in the country, every year has a 2 million program with 50% subsidy for numerous actions. When the Dutch, the Spanish, the Italians have programs that allow them to have access to 200 million euro, you do realize that we, with access to mere 2 million, are fools. Someone needs to coordinate that, and this is why we need the relevant chamber in order for the ministry's strategy to change. We need to add directorates for cooperatives and so on and so forth. And in that way, we will be able to have access to more resources. And of course, the Mercosur. You see how many people blame it and condemn it. They shouldn't, because the Ministry of Rural Development has issued a press release on June 2, 2019, where the minister back then, was celebrating that agreement. Well, this is an exceptional agreement, at least for our products, because we, let's say, for peach and tinned peach, we had a 5% duty, and until that duty, we would export to those countries 1.5 million cartons. We talk about 3 million euro in value. So in Greece, we export 37 million euro product and we import 500 million euro of products. Then you do realize that we're fool not to make the most of this agreement. Let's talk about kiwi. Last time the borders of Brazil were open, we expanded the kiwi from 9,000 tons per year. Now we have increased that by 35%. And the same applies to dairy products, to oil, etc. What's the problem? Well, with maize and other products. Rice, for example. There is a problem for distribution, but we shouldn't blame Brazil. We should blame the fact that we at the European Union signed an agreement with Thailand or Cambodia and another Southeast Asia country in order to import rice from there without duty. And when we have not ensured to have a protected designation of origin in rice that we produce here in Greece, then you realize that we don't have anyone to blame but ourselves. So we're advocates of that, and we demand for that to be implemented. And this implementation has started. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I would like to conclude by saying that, based on our discussion, we have talked about a strategic plan, but it seems that Greece, over the past decade, has a strategic plan only for tourism, not for agriculture. And I would like to repeat what the Secretary General said, that only need dictates change, because and that means that we in Greece should realize that, of course, tourism is a heavy industry, but if we don't have food, we won't be able to feed not ourselves or the tourists that we want to attract. I'm quite happy for that proposal about the chamber, and I'm happy to see that this is moving forward. I see that you're quite positive towards that scenario. I don't know whether you have any questions to our speakers.
Just a minute. We're bringing the microphone. The lady.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Raquel Esteban, coming from Spain. Okay, as you know, from the 70s we have been present in a agronomical revolution. Okay, nowadays Almeria has become one of the biggest producers of vegetables in Europe, together with Murcia, etc., some other regions. I would like to read for you a survey coming from Duhan Trimmer, based on 300 growers. Okay, it's well known that polluted waters problem are coming also from agriculture, but this is also a reality that we have already many other tools that you can use in alternation with chemicals. Okay. Here you have the key barriers to biologicals adoption in Europe. Lack of qualified information. I think education comes first from every single thing that you have to invest in Europe for your industry, for your growers. Significant gaps remain in the availability of dissemination of reliable technical knowledge, limiting growers' understanding of product, positioning, mode of action, and agronomic benefit. Technical capability in the field. Adoption.
Excuse me, can you just wrap up because we're over time?
Yeah, I mean, how you can achieve the adoption of this kind of tools in a country, in a market like Greece, where you have most of the suppliers that rely on distribution, and 90% of the distribution that relies on retailers. How can you overcome this barrier in order to give maximum information and tools to your growers in Greece? For example, the growers...
Mr. Dedousis.
Yeah,
Mr. Yiannakakis.
The Association of Growers in Greece, for example.
Well, may I speak in Greek? So I will answer in Greek. The only way to deal with this oligopoly-like retail market is to create big trade schemes. I mentioned in my statements that we have, for example, New Zealand. They have Zespri, a single company to sell 600,000 tons of kiwis. Now, if we don't follow the same rationale of creating larger schemes, trade schemes that will allow us to negotiate with retailers, well, if we don't do that, we're lost. No matter what the European Union votes for, regulations that might want to help us or anything else, so we need to organize ourselves and we should blame no one but ourselves, right? You in Spain are doing far better than we do. Thank you so much, everyone. I would also like to thank the speakers. Mr. Dedousis, you have something to say? No? Okay, thank you so much.